Welcome to Aging with Dignity, and welcome to Season 2. I'm your host, Bersha. Today we're kicking off Season 2 with a conversation that's a little different. I've gathered a small circle of caregivers to join me today, each with their own story, and how appropriate as we're just coming off of National Caregivers Week. And I had the opportunity to participate in the Canadian Caregiving Summit in Ottawa just this past week. Some staggering statistics came to light, which I'd like to share here today. About 42% of Canadians aged 15 or older, that's about 13.4 million people, provide unpaid care to either care-dependent adults or children. Of those caregivers, 6%, over 800,000, were engaged in what we call the sandwich caregiving generation, caring for both children and care-dependent adults simultaneously. And by 2030, 1 in 4, so about 25% of our population, will be over the age of 65 years. Caregiving needs are only going to grow. Caregivers provide $97 billion in unpaid care each year. 2/3 of caregivers suffer financial stress and fallout. These numbers show how widespread informal caregiving is, literally millions. The burden is uneven, the demands are very real, and this is a national issue, not just isolated families. In our group today, some care for a parent, others for a spouse. Some are doing it from right here in Montreal. Others have contributed to tending to their loved ones from a distance. Some have seen the journey of caregiving to an end. Others are fully immersed in it. We come from different cultures, we speak different languages, and we live different family traditions. But we share one thing in common: the experience of caring for someone we love. This episode is a dialogue. We'll talk about what caregiving really looks like day to day and what helps us get through it, and what we've learned about love, loss, and resilience along the way. Let's begin. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Can we just start with going around the table if you can tell us your name, who you're caring for, where you are. Are you physically living with the person that you're caring for, or are you caring for them from afar? And what stage of caregiving are you at? Are you at the early stages and you anticipate what's coming? Or have you already gone full circle and you're at the other end of coming out of the caregiving? Jesh, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, my name is Jesh Patel. I'm caring for my mother. She has been with me for the past almost 20-30 years, but since last year she started having dementia quite deep, and I take care of her.
And she's living with you?
Living with me, yeah, at home, yeah.
Hi, I'm Mirella. I am at the far end of having helped take care of my father. I wouldn't say I was the primary caretaker in his situation. I was more of a secondary support system for my mom and my family. My dad passed. It's going to be actually 6 years this coming Wednesday. So we definitely went through what we needed to go through during his situation with dementia and Alzheimer's. And so I have definitely a perspective on that.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining.
I'm Helen. I cared for a husband in my late 30s who had cancer of the esophagus, was diagnosed very young, and I had a 5 and a 7-year-old, so it was a very difficult journey of caregiving and trying to live life with a whole family. My husband passed away sadly in 2005, and so I'm well on the other end, but still the emotional toll has been clearly felt by my whole family and myself.
Thank you for joining. Thank you. Nolana?
Good morning. My name is Nolana, and I am the primary caregiver for 2 of my grandparents, my maternal grandparents. They live about 15 minutes from where I do in Edmonton. And then I also am the secondary caregiver for my other grandmother, who's also in Edmonton. And so for her, she's more so in the mid-range in terms of caregiving duties. And then for my maternal grandparents, more so just helping with the IADL, so the shopping, and every Sunday is going and helping them out. But I anticipate there'll be more work along the road. So.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah?
Hi, I'm Sarah Clark, and I've been on a 13-year journey of caregiving for both parents. My mother had peripheral artery disease, became a double leg amputee, and my father was her primary caregiver, so I was secondary. When she passed, my father got cancer and dementia, so I became his primary caregiver. My journey ended in June of this year. So I'm on the other side. So I look forward to speaking and hearing about you. He lived about a 1 hour drive from where I live, so I did a lot of back and forth, but I consider that local.
Okay, I appreciate that, Sarah. I think most of you know my story, or maybe not, but I was secondary caregiver to my mother. My father had cardiac failure and passed away last November. My mother had a very rare form of dementia. I became primary caregiver with 24/7 care for all of her direct support, and we lost her in August of this year. So also, like some of you, on the other side of the caregiving journey. I appreciate all of you coming here and being open to share your stories. I think there's a lot that we learn from each other when we do talk, so I really, really appreciate this. Going forward from here, I will put a question to the group, and whoever feels that they've got something that they'd like to share and answer, please jump in. We ask that we respect that there's no too many people jumping on at the same time, so we could just jump in and out. And also just to respect airtime, that everybody's got stories that we want to share, and we recognize that everybody is learning from that too. So I really appreciate it. The first question is really, how did your journey begin? Was it a gradual shift that happened, or was it really a sudden turning point and all of a sudden you were in the role of caregiver?
Well, for me, it was gradual. So my father started with his dementia and Alzheimer's when I would say he was diagnosed in his 70s, early 70s. And then my dad passed at the age of 84. So it was a long journey. It was a long journey definitely for my mom as the primary caretaker. And it was definitely a learning experience for the entire family. It was something that we needed to constantly shift our way of thinking, our way of dealing, our way of learning, our way of handling, and not only just for ourselves as the secondary caretakers, including with my siblings and my nieces, my nephews, but my mother being the primary caretaker. It was a learning curve for her to understand what was happening, and even for my father to understand what was happening, then to the point where he came to the point where he didn't understand what was happening anymore. So that was a huge shift in all of that. And it took quite a few years, because at the end of the day, he was healthy. He was a fairly healthy man. He did have other medical conditions, but my mother took very good care of him. She would always make sure that he was always well fed, well dressed, took his medication, well cared for. And so that care, what she felt she needed to do for him, really brought him to be able to go through this condition for almost 14 years. Yeah. And she did it, so she did what she did that she needed to do with love, with care, with her dedication. So a lot fell on her. A lot fell on her.
And your mother's situation now?
My mom now is, when we were in the heart of it at one point, it was very, very difficult. And so she had, we were trying to get some caretakers with the CLSC, and, knowing Helen now, knowing how the system works, knowing that this was very new for us, we wanted some help from my mom. And going through the CLSC, they were sending help for her, but in turn, it was really where we should have asked help from my father, which the care is very different when they're looking for respite for the caretaker instead of actually providing care for the actual patient. So hindsight is 20/20 at this point. And, at the end of the day, she ended up, we decided to move my parents into our home for a period of time, both of them, because my mother was going through some surgeries herself. And so that did not go very well over with my father. That was a very difficult period of time. And so they lived with us for about 3 weeks, maybe not more than a month. And we actually had to move them back to their home. And then my mother stayed another I would say another 16 months at home taking care of him, if not 2 years, something like, I don't remember the timeline. And then it just came to the point that after it was just too much for her to care for. And then my father was placed in a CHSLD. So we found one that was close here on the West Island. And then my mother moved in with me for that period of time that my dad was in the residence home. And now once my dad passed, she stayed with us for a little while longer. And, my mother was young at the time. There was an age difference between my parents. And then she's like, she says, I'd like, a place of my own and go back, because she did sell her home when my dad was placed. And now she's living, on her own. She's doing her thing. Thank goodness she's well.
Very good.
Yeah. So it's a blessing.
Thank you for sharing
It's a
that.
blessing. My pleasure.
My journey started in a little more unexpected way because it wasn't cognitive issues. We didn't know he was sick. So we had, he looked tired. He was exhausted. In hindsight now, he would have like coughing or clearing his throat a lot. Thing is, we were both exhausted. We had a 2-year-old and a newborn. So, who would have known? And he had gone to the hospital to get some tests done. They thought it was some kind of routine. They called it Schatzky's web at the time. Maybe something was blocking or whatever. And then I left him at the hospital. I got a call, come back. We've done the testing. The doctor says, sit down. That should have been a sign. I sat down and he said to me, it's stage 4 cancer of the esophagus. We found a tumor. So that's how our saga began. And it was devastating and stressful. And Mirella is correct. Adapting and adjusting is huge in this. And it was all about him and his care. We had 2 young children. So it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming. But my goal was, even though maybe, people who are ill, they all, they try to hide or they try to keep everything under cover. I decided we were going to live our lives and we were going to be a part of our community, because we should not be alone and he should not be alone. And he should realize this is not something to hide from. Everybody has something. And I think that served us well, because we had support, we had love, we had connections with all our people, and everybody treated him with love and respect. And I got the help I needed. A lot of caregivers don't ask for help because they always feel that, oh, I don't want to bother somebody. But we're all in it together, and it makes a big difference not being alone, especially when you have 2 young children, as we did.
Absolutely. So 2 very different. There's a gradual, the cognitive disorders are typically slower, and then a very sudden shift in your situation with your husband.
Yeah.
You touched on it with community and family. Do you think our cultural backgrounds, and we all come from various different backgrounds, do you think our cultural backgrounds prepare us for the caregiving role? Is it expected that one person or another will fall into this caregiving role?
I think for my mother, it was just, for her, I think it was, I can't speak for her. I could just maybe speak for what I saw in what she did. I think it was just very duty bound. Right? This is my husband. This is my partner. This is the father of my children. And she was very committed to taking care of him. And then as a family, with my siblings, like I said, with, my kids, my husband, all of our counterparts, my nieces, my nephew, everybody tried to do their part, whenever possible. Like everybody tried to step up to the plate. And then, at the end of the day, it was, and even like outside of that, like with extended family, my dad had a sibling just up the street, and he was very close with her. And then, at first it was like, we want to kind of keep it within the home, but then, or even if my mother would still go out and do like community events, like, let's say to go to bingo on a, Friday afternoon and take my father. And it's like, I would make my mother understand, Mom, if you explain to people that Dad is not well, they will come to realize that you're in a situation, and maybe they will be more understanding and more compassionate. Again, the point that Helen was saying, that a lot of the times they want to hide and they want to not disclose the fact that somebody's not well. But if you kind of be a little bit more open about it, you might be surprised who's actually willing to be empathetic and compassionate and be able to understand and say, I'm sorry that you're going through this. And, is there anything that, and not to say that maybe somebody might step up to the plate, but just the fact that maybe that they understand and they might not place judgment, or, they might be a little bit more sympathetic to your situation, might help, might not, depending on the environment that you're in. But I have to say we're blessed as a family. We're blessed as a family because we cannot have done any of this without, my like I said, my siblings and, my husband, my kids, my nieces, my nephew, everybody was amazing.
So does becoming a caregiver change your role and your relationship with other people in the family, if anybody else has a different experience? Because yours was really the whole family coming together, even extended. So if you're all in it together, I presume that puts you all on the same page. Just wondering if anybody had a different experience where your relationship with the rest of the family, whether it's the immediate or extended, changes as you take on that caregiving role.
It does kind of, because the time you spend with the family being like my mom is right now completely bedridden almost. Like taking her time, the family, somebody has to sacrifice every time when you have to go out sometimes too. I'm lucky that my wife has my 3 kids to take care of her. So it takes a lot of time of you to spend time with other families, see. And then I don't have any siblings who are here. There's some cousins who come and help talk, but you can expect them to be taken care of. So it takes a lot of time, and the relationships get slow. Not the same kind of afterwards. Exhausting, yeah. It takes a lot of time, yeah.
It's Nolana or Sarah, you have anything to comment on that? I think it's an interesting perspective, Jayesh, that you're bringing, that the tensions come then, right? So I'm just curious if either of you have had similar or different experiences.
Well, I can maybe bring in just in terms of the role with my grandparents, because I know it's a little bit different coming in as a granddaughter. So essentially with my maternal grandparents particularly, over the pandemic, especially my grandpa, he's in his 90s, was starting to have problems with mobility. And essentially with my family, which brings into some of the family dynamics, is that my parents were never checking in on them. None of them were. My aunt was at times, but it wasn't my parents at all. And so for me, I am a health professional. I'd initially had plans of moving to Ontario from Edmonton to get a career, but then seeing when not a lot of family members were stepping in, I decided to actually get a career in Edmonton just so I could stay close to my grandparents. And then with my paternal grandmother, my aunt, she was trying to do her best to take care of her. But again, all 3 of them, they do not want to go into a facility. They want to stay at home for as long as possible. And so that aunt was burning out. And so then I also, because no other family member, despite there being lots of family in Edmonton, no one else stepped in. So of course I offered to help her as well. And so it does bring in a lot of tensions, I find, with coming in as a primary caregiver as a granddaughter, because you get a lot of resentment. Like, why are my parents not stepping in to be able to help my grandparents when they actually live much closer to them? But then at the end of the day, I become closer to my grandparents than I ever have been. And just being able to see their wishes being met, that they want to stay, age, and die at home, allows me to do that. But I'll have siblings that won't even they'll look at me a little bit differently because I'm checking in on them daily. I'm always there for my grandparents and no one else is there. So lots of like buildings of resentment for, why is no one else doing this? Why am I doing all this on my own? Of course, with my husband also helping, though, which I'm fortunate for.
That's another great word, resentment. Right? That we don't all experience it. But I see it and hear it often. I've experienced it myself. People don't get it if they're not in that caregiving role, or they haven't got that, I'm just going to say, opportunity to give, because I really think it's a blessing that we have this opportunity to give to our parents, to our spouses, whoever we're able to caregive for. Yeah, Sarah.
So I was flying solo. Member of my family is estranged from us. So when I stepped into the role, it was helping my father with my mother. And he was amazing. He was an amazing primary caregiver and did a lot of the work that a PSW did, which I think is rare for men to do that with their wives. It's quite a an intimate role, and he did that, and I did all the admin. And then when she passed and he got ill, I stepped in to do what he did for my mother. So, but I was flying solo, so it is a blessing, and it's hard. It's a curse at times. So you lose community. You're flying solo. You're trying to relay to your friends that the casserole and the gifts and the flowers aren't going to work. And you're drowning. So I will say it's pretty hard flying solo, but at the same time, I was unencumbered. So the decisions I got to make, I wasn't doing battle and I wasn't dealing with family dynamics. I made them clearly. I got on with things and I was able to, just create a path of help and success and a lot of love in the case, which is difficult when there's other family members that are telling you what to do or casting judgment. So it's very different for everybody, and what we all share is the same worry, the same anxiety, the same frustration. So
Thank you, Sarah. I think you bring up another great point about the expectations that come. You were able to fly solo, as you said, and that allowed you a bit of freedom to make the decisions. But we shouldn't have to be doing it solo, right? And if we're all on the same page with the folks that are helping us as caregivers, then we can all contribute in the same manner. We're coming in representing different cultural backgrounds here at the table. Canada is a diverse nation, right? We talk about it being a cultural mosaic. Do you think our healthcare and social services system takes that into account and reflects positively in any way? Are there any services that you found in your journey that said, hey, they understand my culture, they understand some of the nuances and challenges that we're facing?
Not from my experience.
No.
Sadly, not from my experience.
It would be a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
They barely at times connect to the people themselves, seniors versus younger people versus any different kind of people. They don't make it, easier for a senior to go into a hospital and not sit there for hours and hours waiting for care. So I would hope cultural would come into effect in our nation, but even the people themselves. That's why I advocate for seniors too, because they go in there and they're staying in a hospital hours. They don't get priority. Their appointments, they could be at the end of the day. Why are we giving seniors earlier appointments? Why are we giving some kind of, we're giving flowers to caregivers, or the government does, but they don't do enough to prioritize their care and their ease of going through the system and helping us caregivers get them through easier.
It's an interesting thing, right? Because if we're coming from a cultural standpoint, and we have many cultures, from old world cultures, we don't put our parents in a home. So if I'm going to have them in my home, Jayesh, like you are, or if I'm visiting them in their home, like you were, able to get flowers doesn't help, right? Culturally, what I found with my parents, the community was coming, they were bringing food. But similar to the flowers, it would have been so much nicer if someone said, you know what, Uncle, why don't you go and meditate for an hour, or read your book, or go on the computer. I'm going to sit with Auntie for an hour. And that respite block comes without the label. Right? Because I think most caregivers don't feel they need that block, that thing, until they've got it.
Yeah, so I definitely do not think that the system is set up for the different cultural backgrounds. So even with me personally, helping with the care for my grandparents, I am an intensive case manager, if you will, with home care in Edmonton. And so a lot of my clients, again, its placement is out of the question for family. It's against their beliefs of sending someone there. But unfortunately, with what the government gives us as case managers in terms of what home care can supply, it's pretty much cookie cutter for every single person. Max for home care four times a day. That's all we can provide. And 6 hours of respite a week. That's it. It doesn't matter what background you have, what your beliefs are. And so then, again, it falls on these poor families because 4 times a day home care isn't enough. But if it's against their beliefs of sending someone to a facility, then they're hooped. They're pretty much trying to do everything they can, quitting their jobs, just so they can be able to care for their parents. So it's still very much focused on facility life, when that shift is definitely on the community, and there's not enough supports going towards the community.
Absolutely.
For me, it was interesting because my father, when the dementia was progressing rapidly during COVID, we had moved in together, and you weren't supposed to go back and forth. And I was kind of concerned about being pulled over on the highway. So I just moved into his 2-bedroom apartment. And when I went back to the office, tried to introduce home care, and then that started getting more and more. The hours started getting extended. So I moved him into assisted living. And even though he ended up moderately severe with dementia, we weren't qualifying for long-term care. He was too fit, the criteria. Unless he broke a hip, he wasn't getting in crisis. And the lineup, the queue is 60,000 people in the line for long-term care. But I will tell you this, you talk about assisted living. It was $18,000 a month. And when we sold this house, we had that income, but the burn rate is quite aggressive. So I had to manage the finances. So I will tell you, I quit my job for the both of us so I felt better and I could get to him 3 days a week to bring the cost down, but to also make sure he was getting proper care. So the system is complex, and I wished my father could have moved in with me. He couldn't stay in the apartment by himself. I couldn't commute that far for work. It was kind of a perfect storm, but I will say there's a lot to be said about you don't just apply for long-term care. The wait list is now, I believe, in Ontario is between 6 and 8 years. So we're not problem solving here. It's getting bigger. And I think me leaving the workforce was, if I don't do this for myself now, I'm going to find myself in the hospital, and then this ship really sinks quickly. So I can juggle two things, but I can't keep up with all of it. And I will tell you, best decision I ever made for me was being with him, stepping up as the daughter and the care partner for him, and then realizing what I was capable of in the end. So it's a sacrifice, but it actually can be a gift depending on how you focus yourself.
So, Sarah, I think what you're saying is interesting on many, many fronts. We do become supermen and women. We find that inner strength. It's shocking that you were able to sell your father's home. So you had the finances, that still wasn't sufficient, and your solution was you had to stop working. That seems counterintuitive, right? That why do I have to stop working in order to keep it financially viable? The financial aspect really differs based on our individual situations. What do you think is the toughest emotional part of being a caregiver? And when you're answering that, were there any positive joys that you found through this as well? And you start to touch on that, Sarah. That's why I want to just jump into that.
Oh, yeah. I think, the frustration and the anger and resentment I was developing as it occurred, I was just getting worked up, and the anxiety and its constant worry. And I thought, so I ended up speaking to, through EAP at work, a therapist who was a psychologist. And I had never done that before. I'm a, keep calm and carry on, stiff upper lip. You got this, figure it out. And he just said, I think there's a lot going on with you, and I think you're in anticipatory grief. And I had never heard of that, so I didn't know. But he said, you've been at this for 10 years, nonstop. And so where do you fit in the mix? And I said, well, there isn't any time. I got to get to my parents or my dad. I've got to get to work. I've got to keep it up. And he's like, no, where are you? And I said, well, I'm just in the middle, rock and a hard place. And he said, that's not an ideal place to be. And it's not sustainable. So the blessing came from letting go of the work in order to refocus and saying, I'm going to, similar to Nolana, I'm going to change and pivot. I'm going to learn how to create a space so I can pivot into a new career, and realize that there's gaps in the space of care and care partners and support. So I jumped into that. But the blessing was really, I got to know him as a person. He was living with dementia, and it was ever changing. And I really thought he made me very present with him. We would still go to Tim Hortons. We would do walks. He couldn't speak. There's a lot of stuff, but he actually brought my worry cortisol levels down. So it was interesting, but that just being around him was calming for me. I was the one that was agitated, worked up, and constant. He was living in his world and trying to remain calm. So it was quite something to see.
You were doing your job, keeping him calm and in his world, right? That you were taking all of that on you. Anyone else want to comment on emotional sides?
No, our biggest worry was that, but I kept it to myself and he kept it to himself, that he would pass away. That was our biggest worry and stress. And the thing is, when you're so young going through all this, what happens is you don't think that that's going to happen. So you go into beast mode. We're going to beat this. We're going to do what we do. But time and you learn a lot about cancer and illnesses, and I've had family members with cognitive and dementia, so I've had it all. So you always think at the beginning there's hope, which there always is. And then things start to happen within life and the system that start to, bring you down. But the biggest amazing part of it all was we got to spend even more time together. So we spent 2.5 years together all the time. So we talked about good, bad, and the other. And it was like a long goodbye, because I don't think that it would have been easy. It was horrible when he passed, but I don't think I would have been able to adjust in a different way if we hadn't had everything said, everything done.
And to Sarah's point, that's a form of anticipatory grief, right? You know it's coming, you just don't know when.
Because you're grieving.
And you're grieving the loss before it actually happens.
Yes, we've spoken about this. Yes. You've been grieving since day one, since the diagnosis, since whenever the crisis started.
Well, maybe not the diagnosis, but certainly when the reality hits that there's an end date here.
Yes, for us, it was the diagnosis. From the diagnosis, yes, yes.
I'm going to throw a wrinkle into the emotional discussion. So I'm not even going to ask if you had it, because I know we all do, but there's guilt, right? How do you deal with the guilt that embraces the role of caregiver?
I don't know if I could actually speak on guilt, because I think my mother lived with that as the primary caretaker. From my role, I'm a very practical person, and I know that dealing with my dad, I knew at a certain point in time that I don't exactly know when it happened, but I do know that I lost him a lot longer. Like, I lost him a long time ago, way before he actually passed. And I was dealing with, from my perspective, I was saying, I know my dad's still there. I love him. I'm going to care for him. But I'm also seeing my mother fall and my mother's decline. And practically, I'm like, I need to help her to try and help him. And from that perspective, when my dad did finally pass, I didn't feel that sense of guilt. I felt a sense of peace, because I kind of said to myself, okay, Dad, now you know who you are again. Now you know who we all are. And now you could look down on us and celebrate, all the new things that are happening, like the marriages that have been going on, the great grandbabies that he's having right now, that my mother's had the pleasure of being part of. And I saw it from a different perspective. I saw it that, he's at peace, I'm at peace, and he's enjoying himself now, looking down on us and watching over us.
It's a beautiful image, right? That the soul is able to now look down, it's lived its purpose, and is now able to enjoy what's continuing.
So guilt, I find it's that you're not doing enough. So I find that with me being in my mid-30s, my husband and I were trying to start a family, but I find that even though we're spending every Sunday afternoon with my grandparents and we're available by phone, I feel that as soon as I leave my grandparents on Sunday night, I feel horrible that I need to be there to be able to spend more time with him. Even my husband and I started taking my grandparents to Mexico the last couple of times, and I don't have enough vacation hours this year, and just the guilt again of not giving enough, even though it's hard when I'm right in the middle of trying to start everything. Even like I'm still fairly new in my career, and it's just I'm not doing enough, but there's not enough time, and then we have to take care of ourselves and take care of our own relationships. It becomes quite difficult.
My guilt was really tied to my reactions to my father. When dementia takes hold, things become illogical. And so we went from a very logical thing in conversation to sort of a very bad dynamic where he was calling me a liar and dropping F-bombs, which he never used, and things. So the guilt was me being resentful to that and getting worked up and reacting very poorly. And we would disengage, and I would leave and go sit in my car and cry, and he'd be sort of crying in his room, and we'd come back together, and we didn't understand how that blow up occurred. So I think for me, I ended up I ended up studying with Teepa Snow so I could learn how to respond and not react, because I knew it's not him. His brain is actively changing. His brain is changing and actively dying. So I have to respect that that's taken over. And so I have to work with my father on new ways to communicate. So that guilt and resentment got eliminated when I learned how to communicate.
That's a great point, because those of us that are dealing, or I was dealing with my mother who had a form of dementia, it manifests in ways that you look at that person, they're not, in my case, that wasn't my mother that I knew and loved before. And hers was quite minimal from everything I've heard about dementia, because hers presented like Parkinson's, and that was what basically took her out was the loss of motor skills, more so than the cognitive disability.
On the point of like Sarah mentioned guilt, initially when she started having the dementia, it was very hard to figure out what's actually was happening. So you're trying to learn what's happening, and you started resenting the why you don't understand something, you see. And then sometimes the anger is to come up, and then later on as you start realizing it was not something, her brain was not working, slowing down, kind of learning. So it was like feeling guilt. How did I respond that way? Should I have understood before or not? But as the time went by, and the other guilt came in was, I have 13 daughters. They're still less than 18, but they started knowing their grandmother not knowing their name, trying to pronounce right now in the season stage, which she doesn't know any one of us, kind of staying with us, just not knowing your mom, not able to know your name. And then you're trying to emotionally say, okay, why you're not knowing that? Then you start, but then you understand, kind of. So it's, did we do something wrong, kind of? It was something we could have done better up front, but it's just, there's always guilt going to stay. Why we couldn't do better, something might have done in a different way. She might have been better, kind of, you see.
Yeah, that's the hard thing, right? Like, could I, should I? What could I have done differently? What could I have done better? And you don't even know what's happening, right?
Yeah.
When it starts, you don't know what's going on. You just, and these are except for your situation, Helen, these are our parents or grandparents. So they were always the ones who told us what to do, right? So now your role is shifting.
She had a better memory than us. She would remember everyone's birthday. This is the day coming up, and within a year, and everything changed.
Wow. Helen, your situation is different in that you're the only one around the table that actually lost a spouse. Do you have any comments or reflections on the shift in the role? Because you start off as equals, and then suddenly you're the caregiver for that person.
Especially being so young.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's true.
So just for the record, I've had family members, grandparents, in-laws who've had dementia. I've gone through that. And really, no guilt. You should have no guilt. You have your mother in your house. You're taking care of her. It's a beautiful thing. You only know when you know. And it's the same with my husband and what happened. You only know when you know. And you can't act or think beyond, especially if it's your first person who has dementia, right? I've had a few now, so now I'm like, oh no. And my people are like, no. I'm like, yes, you need to watch this. So you are amazing. You are amazing. Yeah. And you're a man who really makes an effort wanting to take care of his mother. This is a beautiful thing. I have 4 sons and makes me happy. As far as my husband goes, my husband, as sick as he was, he felt the guilt. I gave my whole life to taking care of my family, my kids, my husband. He felt the guilt that he was not well, that he couldn't participate as much, that he couldn't do as much. And for me, I said to him, I will take care of it all. because he worried about us. Are you guys going to be okay? Are you going to be? And I said, without you, that's going to be the devastation. But once you're gone, if you're gone, I will take care of it. The kids and I will be fine. I knew we would be fine. No one in our family would leave us. No one would not take care of us. And I knew I was capable of taking care of my family. So it was he who had the guilt and the sadness of what's going to happen to all of you. And I was playing many roles. I was playing the role of mother, caregiver, but I was also playing the role of coach, life coach, like to this poor man who kept thinking, well, what's going to happen when what's going to happen? What's going to happen to my family? So we don't always think even their minds. And for the dementia, I saw my people feeling, they saw they were slipping. They saw their mental state was going, and they're sliding too. That's why they get angry. That's why they get devastated, because they know they're losing their
Yeah,
realm.
they do.